Hey y'all, welcome back and welcome to the identity tutorial. The focus of this is going to be the ways that computers and systems can talk to each other. This is the first part in a series of either, I don't know, 2 or 3. We'll see how I'm feeling. It's going to cover OAuth 2.0, OIDC, and static credentials being used for identity and communication. This one's a moderately hefty one. It'll lay a bunch of groundwork and focus on OAuth and OIDC and how they're used in applications and for people. So what are you going to come out of this with? Good question. We're going to cover a simple example app using PassportJS for OAuth, and then a demo app from Auth0 covering OIDC. The next video will build upon all of these concepts and jump into some more uses around interacting with APIs and resources from automated systems. As always, you can find all of the information that we're going to cover, the commands I run, the source code, complete with comments to help you navigate, in the repositories in the description. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Skirt. Little quick TV timeout here. There's a bunch of stuff I'm about to go through on like definitions, defining terms, and concepts. If you don't care and just want to see the demos, you're not going to miss anything. Just skip ahead to the demos. If you want to get deeper and see the terms, please watch, but timestamps are in here. Click through. Do what's right for you. Thanks. All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming. First, we're going to start with a few flows that you might be used to already, OAuth and OIDC. So we're going to do this first so we can see how OIDC builds upon OAuth and then is usable in other workflows. Before we get too deep, let's take a quick time out here and define some terms. A couple notes here on this whiteboard. OAuth is open authorization and OIDC is Open ID Connect. They are two standards used for identity verification. They allow applications to authenticate users without handling their passwords. So note that the big takeaway here is to remember that it's a great way to not have to deal with passwords. If you're going to use Google or GitHub or even Facebook or Meta to log in, you're using them. So let's actually show a few examples while we're at it. If I want to log into Notion, I can see plenty of social ways to log in. If I want to log into Sneak, GitHub's going to be a good example. They also have Google as an option. And if I'm going to log into Zillow even, if I want to check out Zillow's Gone Wild, I can see they have OAuth down here as an option. Now, one not using it is NPM, so there's username and password they are asking for. So note, some different flavors out there, but those are those are some good examples of different types of tools. So plenty of different flavors. Let's break them both down. So what is OAuth? First off, we're going to be thinking of OAuth 2.0. OAuth 2.0 is a framework for authorization. It allows third-party services to exchange web resources on behalf of a user. So it provides client applications a secure delegated access to a server resource on behalf of a resource owner, and specifies a process for resource owners to authorize third-party access to their server resources without sharing their credentials. That's a lot. It's deep in the weeds. You don't need to retain all of that. We have a TLDR here in the bullet points, though. But more importantly, what it's used for. So simply put, it allows you to get into third-party websites or applications using your Google, GitHub, whichever other social accounts without exposing your password. Basically, this stuff is everywhere. So great. We got that. We'll go into an example in a minute, but let's move on and talk shop on OIDC before we get there. OIDC, put really simply, it's standard identity layer on top of OAuth. So OAuth exchanges resource and OIDC checks the identity. Might be asking why is this needed? So applications a lot of times need more than just access to user data. They need to authenticate who the user is. So an example, web application might want to display user profile information or implement security policies based on the identity. And then before OIDC, you have to create a custom solution on top of OAuth to handle the authentication. So that means a really fun thing happened, led to a fragmented ecosystem where integrating with different providers required handling different implementations of user authentication. So OIDC just gives a standardized way to authenticate and simplifies the integration and improves security practices. And I love improving security practices. OIDC also enables single sign-on, so users can log in a single time and have multiple applications without having to log in again for each service. This requires not just the authorization, but also the authentication. You got to know the identity of the user across the services. Back to security. We're almost done with OIDC. By standardizing how authentication information is shared, OIDC also helps in addressing security concerns. So it introduces ID tokens. These are JSON Web Tokens. So, or if you like acronyms as much as I do, you can call them JWT. They provide a secure and standardized way to represent the identity of the user. I don't want to put a pin in JWT. Just remember I just mentioned that because we're going to come back to it later and it's important. So quickly, let's put a bow on it all now. OIDC was added to OAuth 2.0 to fill the authentication gap. And now we can authorize applications to access data on behalf of the user and securely authenticate the user's identity in a standardized manner. OIDC is important for web applications where understanding identity is just as important as accessing data. So with all those terms and me talking at you done now, let's get into it with a couple demos to see the difference between these. So let's get started with OAuth and a really basic example. I have a couple of windows open. We're going to be using Passport to help with this. This is going to be a Node application. I'll go into some of the nuances, but don't worry about exactly what's going on here. Passport's going to be the library. And I want to note also this is not an identity development video, so I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on any of these things. It's really just a simple app that I have here using a really popular library to help with this. So you can go in and actually look through Passport, and they have pretty good documentations, and you can get a description of exactly what's going on. So if you want to look through like strategies here, we're developers, so we're going to be using GitHub. So Passport GitHub here. It's going to let you know the instructions to get up and running and have an example that you can use. Something Passport does really well is just make it easy. So you can define these fields with the client ID, client secret, and callback URL. And that will, in Passport, will do the work of making the connection. We're gonna have to plug these things into the .m file in the repository so this all works. But to get the client ID and client secret, we're gonna have to register an OAuth app in GitHub to get started. So let's go ahead and do that first. So you're gonna go to GitHub. You're gonna run to settings. You're going to go down here. You're going to hit developer settings. You're going to go to OAuth apps. And then I have one already created here. And you're going to go ahead and create the app and a couple fields that you're going to have. You're going to have this callback URL. This is the one that's going to match what you have here. Homepage is just going to be local host and port 3000. This is going to run on port 3000. That's why these 3000s are both here. So if you're following this example, use the port 3000, name the application whatever you want, and then go ahead and create it. And it's going to give you a client ID and then client secret. And make sure that you copy and paste that client secret because you can't get access after it. If you need another one, you can just generate a new client secret here and rotate through. But go ahead and get that created and plug these all in over to the .m.example. So you're going to add these two here. This callback URL, because it's going to be consistent with this, I'm just going to keep in here hard-coded for you, or as a variable as a default. It's also going to ask for a secret. This isn't for OAuth. It's actually for the Express library for the server. So just put anything in here, or just keep it a secret, and then take it out of your mind. Don't think about it at all. Don't worry about it for the rest of this video. Okay, so now let's go ahead and confirm this app starts up. So I'm going to say app.js here. We have some packages here with Node. You can see at the top. These are also going to be in the Node modules in the package.json. So the basics to know, we have Passport, it's the package being used. Express for the Node server. Session is being used, but we're not going to think about that anymore. Down here. And then we also use NodeMon on the back end. So there's going to be, if you look at like the package.json, the start script is going to have NodeMon. That just means if you make a change, you don't have to restart the application every time. Again, these are all kind of like Node specific things. I don't worry about them. Not a Node development video. So if it ships, don't worry about anything else. You also need to have NPM. So you'll definitely need Node. So I'm going to include installation instructions in the docs and the README. But go ahead and run node-v, just check you have a Node version, and then npm-v, and also so you can see which versions that I am using. So once those are installed, go ahead and make those checks. Now we're gonna run npm install or npm I. I'm gonna install the packages. I already have these live, and then you're gonna run npm start. And you can see the server is now running on localhost 3000. Great, everything is up and running. Let me know if you have any questions on that in the comments. But before we click into anything and actually pull up the application itself, let's actually go through what's happening with OAuth. All right, so I have a diagram over here. And I've also commented what's happening inside of the code. So you can see the steps, and they're actually going to match what we're going to see over here. So if you're looking through it, this could be really helpful to see. The first step is you start on the home page, and we're going to click log in. It's going to send us over to GitHub to log in. Once you've logged in, or if you're already logged in, it'll redirect you back to your callback URL that you'd put in with the authorization URL. So that was that URL, the callback. The code is exchanged for an access token. And now that we have the goods, we can use that to access GitHub's APIs to get what we want. In this case, it's just going to be to display the profile information. So a bunch of back and forth to say that, hey, this guy's authorized to share his profile info. So now let's go ahead and see it in action. We'll click through and see the flow. So let's put, I'm here at the application. I'm going to click login with GitHub. It's going to send me over. I'm going to hit continue. And then it displays my profile information. Huzzah! Something else that I want to note is that I'm console logging the access token, which you can see here. So the user token, I want to just note that's what this one looks like for the authorization specifically. It's simple. We can't do much with it other than get the resources that we want, but it's going to be important to remember because when we talk about OIDC in a second, it'll be great to have a baseline understanding here. So now finally, I'm going to log out, which is the last step of that. This is in the way. Log out, and I am back to square one. We can call it a day with authorization now. So, and to shut it down, hit Control-C and get out of this process. And I'm going to run a clear on this. But the app is yours now. It's there with you for you. It has all the comments that you need for all the steps. Go absolutely wild. Have fun with it. Okay, so now let's take a break. Maybe walk around for a minute, do some push-ups, and get on to the next section, OIDC. All right, so on to OIDC. And understand the value that OIDC brings beyond that of the basic OAuth we just saw. We're going to use an Auth0 sample application. And really, instead of building all of this from scratch, let's just get one that's up to date, has all the things that we need. We aren't going to focus too much on what's happening with the application itself or the tooling, more so just the authentication mechanism. But all that being said, a quick blurb on configuring. So first off, this application includes a front end built on React and a backend API. The API is simple and just confirms your token was validated. The README here does a better job of describing it than I would do. So I encourage you just to look it through the README and to dig a bit deeper into that. So I recommend going through this and ensuring that you follow the instructions to if you want to get a better sense of what's going on. So first off, you're going to see that we have some things that we need to plug in for this example to plug these in. So what you need to do for that is create a free account of Auth0 if you don't already have one. It's really easy. You'll be creating a dev account, and you'll also be using OAuth with OIDC when signing up. So that's pretty cool. So hit the sign up button. I'm going to hit login myself. I'm going to continue with GitHub. I'm going to give myself access. Cool, and here I am inside. You need to create an application for this. So I'm going to run over to my applications. You would have create app if you had maxed out like I did. I called mine here is demo video. And there's going to be a few things that you're going to need from this. So just copying and pasting. These are all going to go in the authconfig.json. So you can see domain, client ID. Domain is going to be here. Client ID. you would have the allowed callback URL. So I use this for these types of things. So put both these in. I'll put these all in the chat too. And so we'll copy and paste those, and we will call it a day. One other note, you're going to see audience here. This is going to be cool to see. So I'll put what I put in the chat. I just did https://demovideo.com. But it'll be cool to see this in the response, so you'll have an idea of exactly what's going on. So I would recommend defining this. I will put in the README what to put in there if you like a generic thing to put in, or put in whatever you'd like. So run this, and I'm going to jump over to the repo back here. These are all going again in the auth.json. And so I'm just going to break down what's happening in this repository. Again, not going to get too deep. It's already configured. The front end is going to be under source over here. So this is going to be the front end application that you're going to see. And then the API server.js. This is going to be outside of that source directory. And this is all the API stuff is going to be in here. One thing I added to this repository, this is the API server, under the external API.js, I wrote a console log to actually check out once we call the API. I just want to see the token that's being used. So I put a console log here to actually get the token that we'll see in a second. So just note that's the one change that I made to this. Other than that, I just followed the instructions. So unlike the last repo, which uses NPM, this one uses Yarn. I should have just done Yarn to keep it really consistent, obviously, but I didn't, and here we are. Don't worry about the tooling, though. I'll guide you through it here. You can just run yarn version. Again, the installation instructions are going to be in the README, but you can see I have yarn up and running. Then you're going to run yarn to install all of the packages. I already have those installed. Then to spin this up, I'm going to hit yarn start just to hit up in kind of dev mode. But if you want to run like yarn start dev, like they say in the instructions, you can also do that and spin up the full dev server. The start is going to spin up a front end and back end application altogether. So really you have to run one command to get this full app running. So let me do this. I will note before that, I would recommend signing out just for any like cookie purposes. So I'm going to log out of this, and I'm also actually going to really quickly, I'm going to kind of wipe my history from the last little bit. I'm going to hide that, but I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I just cleared my history for the last hour. I just don't want any cookie issues. So if you're hitting an issue going through this, having logged into Auth0, that could be it. So I would just recommend either putting this into the fresh window or wiping out your history. So now let's start this thing up. I'm going to run yarn start. See the API server, so the back end is going to be running on port 3001, and this is going to be the front end, which is going to be running on port 3000. All right, I think I had to go clean up some cookies from the last one. I had a couple things open that shouldn't have been, but let me try to run this now. Great, so this spins up. You can see, you saw in the log, they're spinning up a dev server on localhost 3001. And then this is going to be running on localhost 3000. This is the front end application. So we already went through what the flow looks like for OAuth 2.0, but let's talk about how this one is going to be just a little bit different. Good news, it's actually almost the same. I'm going to pull this over. This is the OIDC flow. For this diagram, just a couple new things. So first, the initial request is going to also include a scope of the user ID. And then second, all these things kind of happen. And then once we get the authorization token back, we also get an ID token. ID token is really cool, and we'll show what it looks like. So great. This is a really similar flow. Again, benefit of it being built upon OAuth. And the same thing got us in this early application. This just pulls in information from the service around our profile and identity. So this application, let's spin this thing up. Let's go ahead and log in. So I'm going to hit log in. This is going to have just a Google option. I just took some of that out, but I just signed in with Google here, and it works. This is great. This is really cool by having a fully built out app. Looks really cool. It is really fun to be able to just do that. This also does something else. I mentioned that console log. So if we go to the external API, I can ping the API. Woohoo! Access token was successfully validated. Yippee! So in the console, we also get a token. So I mentioned that OIDC is really important. So this included something called a JSON Web Token. We saw with that other like authorization token for OAuth. It was short. This is way different. This one's really powerful. So let me pull it up in the console, and we can see I actually console logged this token here. I get the token, so I pull this up, and I can copy and paste. I know you're probably looking at this and you're like, you said this is a JSON Web Token. This does not look like JSON to me. That's right. That's because it's encrypted. So to see the decrypted, we're going to jump over to jwt.io. This is a great tool that can help you see what's actually happening and learn some more about JWT on the way. Don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but let's copy it. We'll copy and paste ours in a second. So this is some information I would recommend taking a look through, talking about the structure. We'll actually go into what this is, but I would recommend reading this if you want to go get a bit deeper. Going back here, and we're just actually going to paste ours. So you see they have one here, and boom, it is pasted. There are going to be 3 sections. You can see the period, splitting them up, and how they translate over here. So let's talk about it. This is the first piece. So we get the header over here. This is going to be the algorithm that we're using here at the top. The next one, the payload. Here we go. So these are the best practice ones. The payload, you can include different things. They include things like issuer expiration. So important because these can be short-lived. You can see the expiration. So really quickly, shortly to expire. The next day, and you can really shorten that down too for kind of what you want to do. And subject and audience. So I mentioned I added in the audience over here to this example, and that's where that would come over. So I said demovideo.com, and then we also get this kind of the dev app that we're using. So these are all coming back with the audience. Yeah, and the fact that we can just kind of break these things up and bake these things in to make it really easy for our specific purpose. So just like the thing about using an expiration, having this token specifically for specific purposes. So really cool. And then below, the blue is going to be the signature. Overall, with the signature and the public-private key pairs, and how compact and portable these tokens are and what they include, it makes sense that these are going to be used everywhere. Quick side note, if you do want to hear more about encryption, I'm not going to go too deep on it here. Let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll make a video on that. And again, not too deep in the weeds on JWT either, but just a great understanding of how this token can be used for identity and why it's so helpful to have something really portable and useful for things like SSO. So that's it for OIDC. It has authentication on top of authorization, and it's used everywhere. So what we just learned, we learned about OAuth and OIDC. We saw a couple examples. We implemented ourselves, and then we examined the tokens. Now in the next video, we're going to build upon this and talk about these concepts being used in things like pipelines and interacting with APIs. Let me know if you have any questions, but thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.